Hey, my name is Rowan Smith and I want to welcome you to the Training for Trekking podcast. Now, this is the world's very first podcast which is entirely dedicated to helping you train, prepare and conquer your upcoming hike, trek or mountain adventure. So once a week, I'm going to be giving you quality and practical information on the subjects of physical preparation for trekking, dealing with altitude and nutrition on the trail, so you can know everything you need to be doing to have the best chance of a safe, enjoyable and successful adventure. So now you know what you're in for, let's get into today's episode. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are talking through some simple strategies which a hiker can use at the bottom of a big hill climb. Now, this episode was inspired by a conversation I was having recently with one of my hikers, and they were sort of saying, look, I feel like my fitness is improving. I feel like I'm getting stronger. I'm feeling like I'm getting more confident. But one thing I'm aware of is when I'm on the trail, when I get to the bottom of a big, steep hill, I really talk myself out of it. I start getting nervous. I start getting agitated. I look at it, I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do that? I'm going to be absolutely knackered. And she was sort of saying that it was just a recurring theme. And pretty much any time she came across a steep climb on the trail, she'd get in this negative thought pattern. She'd get really low and she wouldn't really have a good time. And then essentially when she was actually on the hill, she would sort of get to this stage where she was, just not going very well. And she felt like she was just talking herself out of it. And it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy. And she was asking sort of some ideas around what she could do to help with this. And as being, one of my hikers, yes, we're already doing plenty of training off the trail to help with this. We're already doing strength training. We're already doing our hiking specific conditioning. We're already doing everything else and slowly building that up. And she was aware that I was improving. But she was looking for strategies she could do in the moment to kind of help in this situation. So today I want to talk you through three really simple strategies for if you are this type of person, where you look at a tough section of trail. It could be a super long ascent, a super long descent. It could be rock scrambling. It could be whatever it may be. But if you look at a section of trail and you're like, you know what, this isn't going to be much fun. And you get in that negative thought pattern, you go in a bit of a spiral, you kind of talk yourself out of it, and you find yourself in this bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so 3 simple tips anyone can use. And even if you don't, aren't in this particular situation, it'll probably help you with, tougher sections of trail anyway. So essentially 3 tips. First and foremost, the simplest one, it takes about 30 seconds, dead easy, is literally just have a bite or a sip to eat. At the bottom of the hill, just have a bite of something that's high carbohydrate, low, quick to digest, or have a sip of, electrolyte supplement or whatever it may be. Literally that. Super simple. But what this can do is, as we've talked in this podcast many times is, carbohydrates, primary fuel source when we're hiking. When we're pushing higher intensities, the body relies more and more on carbohydrates. Now, usually when we're in this situation on the hill, we'll probably, unless we've had a really big long day, we probably already have enough fuel in our body. It's probably not going to make a dramatic difference just to have literally one bite of like a snake or a gummy bear or a piece of dried fruit or, just a sip of electrolytes. It's probably not going to make a major difference. But what it can do is there's some interesting sort of work where people have realized that this stuff, yes, it does help physiologically, but it also helps psychologically as well. And it actually has a pretty strong effect for people who are looking at tough sections of training. And literally just having a really short burst of sugar or short burst of energy, or even in the fact of having a placebo where it's not even anything in it, but they think they're having it, that can actually improve exercise performance in the short term, actually improve people's, I think it's optimism, I can't remember how they phrase it, or something like that, but it can be very effective. So whether it's from the sugar, whether it's just from the thought of the sugar or whatever it may be, could be anything. But the cool thing is that it works. So essentially at the bottom of a hill, you could literally just have one jelly bean, or you could just have a sip of electrolytes, get that in your mouth, and then go do the hill. And, it's not going to completely change things around, but it'll make a pretty significant difference. Now, to say this when I'm When I'm saying just have a bite, just have a sip, that's really what I mean. I don't mean sit down and have a whole handful of jelly beans or, a sandwich or whatever it may be at the bottom of every hill. Obviously, that's not super practical. That'll take all day. And also, if you have too much, it may sit in your gut and make this climbing even more uncomfortable. But literally just a bite, just a sip, and give it a whirl. And so for my hiker, I said, look, you're carrying an electrolyte supplement with you. At the bottom of each hill, just take a second, have a sip, swirl it around your mouth, swallow it, and then get into it. And that, simple enough, can actually make a bit of a difference. So that's number one. Takes 30 seconds to put into action, but it's definitely worth giving it a go. Now, number two was sort of a technique more on the mental side of things. And this is really good when we do find ourselves stuck in negative thought patterns. If we always sort of see something, do something, and we immediately go negative. Because the tricky thing with this is when we do go negative, when we start saying this is going to be hard, when we start saying this is going to be tough, when we start saying we're going to be tired, the body believes it. The body will follow what the mind thinks about in these situations. And it's very, very clear that that does happen. So if you are negative in it and going into this, it can be, that self-fulfilling prophecy, as I mentioned. So one strategy I recommended to my hiker was in this situation, if you catch yourself going negative, what I want you to do is just take a second and then reframe it in a positive way and say that to yourself, either out loud or in your head. So for example, if she was sort of saying, oh my gosh, this hill, it's going to be really, really tough. I'm going to be really tired. Just reframe it going, you know what? I'm excited I get to climb this hill. This is going to be fantastic when I'm at the top. Or if you're sort of saying, okay, you know what, my legs are going to be really, really sore through this. And you can kind of say, you know what, I love that feeling of my legs working. And I love to use this to power through my adventures. You can be as corny as you want, in all honesty, as long as you take that negative thought and reframe it in some type of positive way. And then to sort of cement that, you can repeat that to yourself again and again and again during the climb to make sure you're not going negative. And just keep on repeating it like a mantra again and again and again and again. And that can make a pretty significant difference. And I definitely recommend giving that a go. And then the third strategy, sort of we talked about, a simple nutrition thing, simple mental thing, in regards to pacing in this type of situation is typically, I think we talked about this in the podcast a few times, but typically when we do our hills and, if we really, really struggle with it, sometimes we have a tendency just to sort of go really, really quick, get really huffed and puffed, get tired, and then it just turns into a struggle all the way up. So, as the old saying goes, slow and steady typically is best with this type of thing. So when you're looking at climbing your hills, it's trying to stick to that nose breathing pace that I talk about in this podcast all the time, going up the hill and trying to maintain the pace where you can breathe through your nose. It might be really, really, really slow, but if you can stick to that pace, you can probably be able to sustain that for much, much longer up the hill. So instead of stop, start, getting really uncomfortable, you can go very, very slow, crawl your way up the hill, but you can kind of do that in one stint and not get to that really uncomfortable point. Now, to be clear, if you've never done that before, the first few times you do it, it's gonna suck. You might not be able to maintain it for a full climb. It might be really, really slow, whatever it may be. But this is a skill that you should probably practice in your training, practice in your hikes. And over time, it can be very, very effective at making these things more comfortable. So essentially, if you are in this situation, if you put those three things together, have a bite or a sip of something high carbohydrate, if you reframe those negative thoughts in a positive light, and if you stick to that sort of lower intensity nose breathing pace for the climb, I would not be surprised if it makes a significant difference. And then the beauty with this type of thing is as once you start doing climbs or doing situations on the trail and it doesn't feel as bad as it has previously, and you start feeling a bit fresher, feeling a bit more confident, that kind of snowballs and it sort of eliminates that negative stuff. You start to looking forward to it. You start to really believe that sort of positive thing is saying, and it sort of keeps on shifting and gets easier and easier and easier and easier. So the first ones will be tough. You will need to remind yourself again and again and again with that positive reframe. You will need to remind yourself again and again and again to stick to that pacing. But over time, it gets better and better and better, and eventually you'll be flying up those hills. So if you are that type of person who does struggle with that negative thought pattern on hills, on descents, on whatever it may be, give these 3 tips a go, and I wouldn't be surprised if it does make a difference for you. So I think that's probably enough about that today. Enough about that subject. If anyone does have any questions off this, want any extra ideas, want me to expand on this, whatever it may be, as always, you can come and find me in the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group. Now, in that group, I'm always happy to share extra ideas, expand on these episodes, and all of that jazz. So if you want to find that, that's the Training for Hiking and Trekking Facebook group. I'll leave a link in the show notes below. But aside from that, thank you so much for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you get a bit out of it, and we'll talk to you very soon. Bye.